Hello, we're going to talk about Baymax, the new series that's landed on Disney Plus. I don't know when it came out because I've been keeping an eye out for it, and then it just came up as a new to Disney Plus, and I was like, oh, when did this land? So we basically binged the whole series. We don't normally do binging, but the episodes are like 10 to 12 minutes long, so
And there's only six of
and
them.
there's only six of them, so it was like barely an hour. It was like just like an hour and five, and we were done. And so we just thought there was a couple of things that popped up. A, we loved it, and B, there was just some things we thought actually this is worth doing one of our little reviews about. So I've got the episodes up on the screen over here, so I can remember. He'll remember. It's just I won't. So first off, Kiko. Now, what I thought was great about this was it. I felt it gave you kind of what you thought the series would be. It delivers bob on what you expected from Baymax as a show. I do remember thinking about halfway through it, I'm not going to be able to watch more than one or two episodes because my face hurt from the laughter because it was just bonkers. I've not checked, but I'm fairly sure that headband. Spoilers. That headband she wears is the Karate Kid. I'm sure it's the right pattern. Not the right colours, but the right pattern.
Never
I might be wrong.
So.
Yeah, it's a long time since I saw them. So what did you think of the first one?
Loved it.
Yeah.
But it was very what you'd expect in terms of traditional Baymax from Big Hero 6.
Yeah.
Right down to him kind of sort of getting it but not getting it.
Yeah.
Which obviously if you've watched Big Hero 6 you'll know exactly what we're talking about with the way that Baymax is very literal.
Yeah. I just laughed so much in that first episode. And I think that's all part of a wider plan that will come into more obvious play as we talk about some of the later episodes. As they're only 10 minutes long, there's not loads to say about them. So episode 2, Cass, all based around Cass, yeah, heroes aren't, is what I was going to say. When she injures herself and Baymax has to run the cafe. And I remember thinking that actually it was less Baymaxy, but still funny.
Yes.
But there was kind of, it started to bring in character a bit more. It was still that kind of beautiful innocence that Baymax has.
But it was also, I think, this was very much, it was a character moment for Cass, who obviously, again, if you watch the movie, you'll know Cass from that. But what this kind of did was kind of fill in just some of the little character moments for Cass in terms of, what she was to Hero after obviously what happened with Tadashi and etc. So that was quite a nice touch. And again, something that neither of us realised / remembered is that it's Maya Rudolph doing the voice of Cass, who is an absolute delight in everything she does.
Yeah. Like, if you ever see this, Maya, you are welcome here any day. Just drop in. Just turn up. We're fine with that. She's never going to see this. Never going to see this.
Not even if we tagged her.
No, never going to see this. And then
Can we tag her?
I don't know. Maybe. Then we come to episode 3, and Sophia, and an episode that just did so many brilliant things so well. I'd already, because there's I'm gonna go heavy spoilers with this one. So if you haven't seen Sophia, and you don't
look away now.
Yeah, basically go watch it. It's 12 minutes long. Go watch it now and come back.
It is worth it.
So you said, oh, that's a nice touch when you noticed the I can't remember how it was worded, but the unisex toilets.
It was all gender
toilets. I'd already clocked that in the corridor, and I thought it was going to stay in the background as that's a nice background thing. So when it became a plot point, I was like, oh, interesting. And then you had no, it wasn't this one. But then obviously the whole point of this one is girl in school has her first period, and they don't shy away from anything. It's all talked about very openly, very cleverly, because it's still got the humour that you have kind of grown through with the series. But I think that's where they were clever with episode 1 being exactly what you expect. and then episode 2 just took a step away. Then episode 3 goes completely into obviously
Mm.
where they're really trying to go with this, which is something a little deeper. And it's interesting because I don't know the producers have come out and said this, but everyone, like lots of people I know, saw Turning Red, and were like, oh well, that's clearly all sort of about a girl getting her own period, but they don't ever actually say what it is, and and I don't know. I've got to admit, I didn't make that connection, but this is me, right? So yeah. But after they'd said it, I was like, oh yeah, okay, get it. But the fact that this just in 12 minutes does what that film didn't quite do, or wasn't quite brave enough to do because it was going into cinemas, or whatever reasons there may or may not have been, if that was what the producers were actually trying to talk about. It might just be people are leaping to a conclusion there that isn't actually there.
I think it was a lot of internet trolls being internet trolls about it as well, making it
probably,
red,
and it was. I just thought this was done so well because they didn't suddenly go preachy. They didn't suddenly go all serious. The same humour is still there.
I think the nicest thing, again, we're two blokes talking about it, so this is not something that we have ever or will ever experience. But certainly from, I think, stuff I've seen, like growing up and, sort of media portrayals and all that sort of stuff, one of the things that I absolutely loved about this is that it didn't take, from a better phrase, the standard approach to Sophia's first period. She wasn't upset about having her first period because of biology like that. It was basically about the whole, she still wanted to be a kid.
Yeah.
And she was concerned that, and again, it's kind of like this weird flipping again of I think of what you see in a lot of media, where suddenly it's like, members of the family are kind of almost sort of like horrified by the fact that their baby girl is becoming an adult. And the eponymous baby girl in this is kind of like, no, but I want to be a woman, I want to be taking more responsibility, this, that, and the other. This kind of flipped that on its head, which again, like I said, I absolutely love. Sophia literally just wants to still be a kid, and I think this is where something like Baymax really works, because obviously, sort of that kind of very literal approach that sort of Baymax as a character has and stuff absolutely works in an environment like this, because it's just completely you are still you. Sort of nothing. Doesn't matter what happens to you, whatever. None of that changes it. So it's this very kind of weirdly down to earth sort of approach to it. But also, I think like sort of Paul's mentioned, the fact that it's just very this is menstruation. It's perfectly normal. It's perfectly natural. Again, it's that normalizing of a biological process that that plenty of people who menstruate will have to go through at some point.
Yeah, and when you look at things like like period poverty in this country, as well as around the world, those are things that have had to be brought forward, because you can't deal with a problem if you don't talk about a problem. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of that sort of thing. So I just, and obviously, you've got sisters, nieces, all this sort of thing, and I just think, oh my God, this is something that I think gives me a better understanding of kind of how they feel about some things like this. Because like Paul said, best friend in the world, it's not something I can ever totally relate to. But then what this episode was, you then in the chemist.
Yes.
Absolutely. When you had all the different people giving Baymax advice on whether it was tampons or pads or with wings, and again I was thinking about that, thinking, how would you know what the closest, and it's not close at all, but the closest relevance I've got is like the first time we try and go buy condoms, you're like, oh, what ones are going to work, what ones aren't, what's safe, what's not, oh God, what's good, do I pay more? It's like, again, like I said, not close, but it's the closest I've got in my life. But then you had like different women of different ages, and quite clearly a trans man who would have had a first period at some point probably before transitioning is what I took from the character.
I just think I think it was just someone who was trans.
Right.
I don't think you're not given enough of, and you know,
No, yeah. That's what I'm saying. So that's my takeaway.
Someone who's trans, so it's not made clear whether this is someone who's transitioning to become, you know, sort of, you know, a trans woman, or someone, you know, who identifies as trans male. But it was just, there was no attention drawn to it whatsoever. I mean, I because
one line really,
and not even that. It was
like a word. I don't know.
It was literally just the fact that
the character had one line.
Yeah. But it was just part of the general sort of scene, and where you have like these 5 or 6 different sort of people who menstruate, basically talking about like the different products that they use. But basically there's literally just one shot where it's kind of obviously sort of focused. I think it was on Baymax, like holding one of like the 1,500 products that he's looking at, and what you just get in the background is basically like a kind of like a cross section essentially of someone who's very obviously wearing the trans pride sort of colours, because that's what triggered it for me. And then you kind of cut to it, and again, you know, it's just the way it was done was just absolutely glorious. And again, it's not something you see in mainstream media. Anything that kind of focuses on the trans experience, you know, whatever that may be, never talks about, again, in the concept of, you know, periods, you know, whether you are transitioning from or transitioning to, whether you are even wanting to transition. You know, it tends to be focused more on that, or like, you know, sort of the bigotry and whatnot. There's very little, if any, I think that focuses on just some of the basic, if like, you know, biological sort of issues that people who identify as trans have to kind of deal with and face in their own sort of like journeys. So to have such a big thing, I think, be made just so weirdly almost unworthy of commenting. You know, it wasn't the focus of the story, it was just there.
Yeah.
And
as things should be, really.
Yeah, and I think that's something that sort of I think certainly queer people in general, so I mean I say queer people, I'm talking for a whole bunch of people that I have no right to talk about, but certainly for me as a queer person, that's one of the things that when I was growing up I would have killed to see that kind of the stuff that sort of
normalized.
Yeah, the stuff that sort of like, you know, sort of the sort of hetero sort of normality that everyone else, you know, if you identify as heterosexual or not on some variation of the queer spectrum, kind of essentially gets to take for granted, because it's basically it's how the world works for you. Whereas if you're growing up as a queer kid, you know, whatever that particular version of queer may be, you generally don't get to see that sort of thing.
Don't even start me.
So, you know, to kind of have that just be there and not be the focus, the issue, the moral of the story, all of that sort of stuff was just glorious.
Yeah. Which leads it nicely into the next episode, which was about the guy with his fish allergy.
Yes.
You know, but then he flirts very badly, very briefly with a guy at the start of the episode.
Yes.
And again, it's not highlighted, it's not the point. It's just done lifelike and naturally. And again, in an 11-minute cartoon that's kind of, you know, they don't say it's aimed at kids, but your perception of a Disney product like this is that it's aimed with children viewers in mind.
Yeah, and the age recommendation is 9+.
Yeah, right, there we are.
Make of that what you will.
Yeah. And then, you know, it's reaffirmed at the end of the episode when he finally actually asks the guy on a date.
Yes.
And he says yes. I thought that character that he asks out actually really looked like Tadashi as well.
Yes.
For a minute I was like, oh, is this kind of in the past, and is that going to turn out to be him? And I was like, oh, this is going to end up bad. He's going to ask on a date and he's going to die. But it turned out not to be him. Or it wasn't clear, but probably not him.
No, it definitely wasn't, because his name...
Oh, did his name come up?
Yeah.
Right.
He refers to him by name at one point.
Right. Oh, he does actually, yeah. Yeah, so not him.
But it was again, it was nice because I say this character, it's a queer person of color. Well, in fact, technically, it's two queer people of color. Because obviously, sort of Mabuse, the main character, is of sort of is basically, I think, possibly black. I mean, it's never, again, it's not pointed out what their kind of ethnicity actually is. Which again, I think was very in keeping with the original movie, where
as I say, because that was clear, the whole
like
East and West culture in one city, wasn't it? That was the whole point. It was I can't remember, is it San Fran Tokyo or something it's called?
It's something like that.
Yeah, and it kind of does that whole, and then the characters have got a very mixed white/Asian look to them.
Yeah.
And I think that's, again, I think it was kind of the point of that society, wasn't it? It was the whole near future, and these sort of things don't matter anymore. We wish. But then you move on to episode 5.
Yachi.
The cat. So you'd seen this cat in the background a couple of times. I'd only really clocked him the once. Paul had clocked him a couple of times. And then
think you're fairly typical semi-feral street cat.
It's just a stray. It's just a stray. It's a street stray, a city stray. But it's Charlie, our cat, because he was a semi-stray that we took in. It looks exactly like him. I'd go and get him, but you won't let me pick him up. He's a sod.
But he's quite comfortable.
I was just checking. He's asleep on his box. But it was him to a T. And then when it starts making noises, it was him. I'm like, has these animators met our cat? And then it's just, again, it was a bit more of a traditional Baymax romp towards the end.
Yes.
And then we can't really. I'm not going to talk about the end of that episode or the final episode, because you kind of, that's too much.
Yeah.
You need to just go into that. But I just thought, for such a almost throwaway series, I know they've done like the Spark shorts and the Pixar shorts, have touched on a lot of like queer identity and that, and and things like special needs, and like Asperger's,
animal cruelty.
Yeah, there's a lot of, they've touched on a lot of topics.
Which again, if you haven't watched
they're glorious. They're glorious.
They are amazing.
But they are full on the sort of things you expect to see nominated for best short at the Oscars.
Yeah,
it's not the same thing that comes out under the Disney banner on a streaming service or a tentpole movie. And bear in mind, Big Hero 6 is a larger brand because it was official Disney animation movie, had a spin-off series. So you are talking, while it's not one of the larger Disney IPs, Baymax is certainly way up there. He's not a Stitch, but he's a big property. I got really excited when I met him in Disney. In fact, I think that's still the wallpaper on my phone. Me fist bumping Baymax. So he's that character where you say that, oh my god, I love Baymax. Yeah. So he's gonna pull in numbers. Do you know what I mean? It's and again, the whole pull through from the first episode just being exactly what you expect, and that daftness that is that Baymax innocence, to them by episode 3 be throwing at you children with periods, trans people, then in episode 4 queer people. You know what I mean? To be sort of just doing that in the way that it really ought to be done, which is, I know obviously we're making a big deal out of it because we're celebrating the fact that they didn't. Make sense? I know it's because somebody will comment, we've got 7 viewers and they're all our friends, they're not going to fucking comment. But do you know what I mean? I think that's the point. The whole thing is just glorious. I hope they do more. I don't know. It's just so much fun.